Ellen White Reconsidered, a series of presentations for people who have questions about Ellen White's writings. Today, our subject will be finishing touches to Glory, Glory, Glory. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to focus today on a few things that have popped up as I have been finishing out the book Glory, Glory, Glory. It's going to be available very soon, and I'm working on the indexing. And as I do, I find a few more details to squeeze into the book. Let's take a look at what I was working on this week. A friend sent me a number of corrections for the supplemental exhibit that's going to be available. It'll be free online for Glory, Glory, Glory. Let me kind of scroll through here. That's the opening page. It's going to be a number of letters and recollections that go back from 1838 on up to 1854 at the time that Ellen White's early vision books were completed. You can see I put in a lot of illustrations. That's going to be in the new book, and footnotes that go along with it. Each of these letters is going to have a little synopsis so that it introduces the material. And here are some letters from Joseph Turner. Most of these are going to be from James White. So I've been correcting these items as I've gone through and adding in helpful little comments in the bottom that will help you to see what's going on. But in the meantime, I've also been corresponding with some friends that have expertise in history, and we're looking at some of the details that had to do with one of the first instances that was described, not here in this particular book, but let's open up the other one. So here's the other one. This is the main text of the book, and you'll see it's going to be published by Teach Services. And we'll zoom on down here to the first description of her work. Glory, glory, glory are words Ellen White frequently uttered as she went into vision. This exuberant exclamation certainly fits the glimpses of glory she saw while in vision. But what was the source of the visions? 5 explanations have been offered, but only one of these fits all the evidence. We will consider their merits and limitations below. So that's the first introductory essay, and we'll have several others, 2 others in here, but they focus on the glimpses of glory. That's the first part. And the second part is a prelude to publishing. So it goes into some of the details of Ellen White's conversion. And I condensed the story and augmented the story as written by Merlin Burt. A very beautiful story of her early life and the effects that the accident she had on her, where she tried to go back to school, and on down to listening to William Miller when he came to town. And then we have her experience in recognizing the simplicity of coming to God. And we talked about this in a previous video. All right, well, let's move along down through that section. We're going to go to the writing of her book, and here's a timeline of some of the events in her life during this period. The response to her first vision. This is going to be quite interesting because it brings together materials that have not been put together in her own words as she from different instances when she talked about it. You can see it's composited from 3 different sources. But as I was going through this magazine, the Advent Mirror came up because there's been a concern that Ellen White's vision was as the result of her reading, that she got this from Joseph Turner. Here we have the documentation for it here in the footnote. Notice that this publication, the Advent Mirror, in which Joseph Turner, who was an early Adventist and knew Ellen White and was quite connected. I've been discovering more about him since then. But he talks about the bridegroom and how that Christ had not come because he had to receive the kingdom before he comes, and that there's a delay before he comes. And that explanation he put into this paper in January of 1845. Well, Ellen White made mention of the fact that there was one of his papers on a shelf somewhere in the house where she was staying, but she hadn't read it, she said. And people said, well, yeah, likely story. She probably read it, and that influenced her to have a vision. But that doesn't quite make sense, because here we have the date for this publication, and I've been able to put the pieces together here. Let's see, here's the footnote that describes it. Turner did not have a permanent residence in Portland, but stayed with other Adventists while he was in town. I found in the U.S. Census for 1850 that he was living by then in Hartford, Connecticut, but early on he was traveling about. He met with Ellen White before he left, and he said he was eager to leave town. And when he left Portland, he went to Dorchester, Maine. He stayed with Freeman Greenwood Brown, and there he shared his ideas. And then while he was there in Dorchester, which is near Boston, he published his new bridegroom views in this single issue of the Advent Mirror. That's the one we have right here, okay? Just a little facsimile of it. And he published it in January after he left Ellen White. So the publication that was on the shelf was not the Advent Mirror that had his new view. Ellen White could not have based her vision on it. What was in the house would have been the Hope of Israel Extra, which he had published back in December. So Ellen White had no way of knowing what it was, since she wasn't reading, since it wasn't published, and even more so, Turner said that he had just shared his new view the night before when he had talked to her. And then this Hope of Israel, which we don't know for sure exactly what's in it because there is no longer any copy of it available. It'd be great if somebody would find it. But the accusation that she drew her vision from the Hope of Israel that was published in December can be nothing more than an unwarranted guess, because we don't have the paper itself to verify what was even in it. It makes the most sense that he had come to that conclusion, shared it with her, but that her vision was entirely different from what they had believed. They had believed that the period of time that was described by the prophecy in Daniel was not the return of Christ, and therefore that they had completely mixed it up. So by the time that Turner spoke with her, she was no longer believing that there was any significance to October 22, 1844. And the vision, which she was hesitant to share with anyone, but that she finally shared with him because he insisted on it, was turning everything on its head. It was saying, go back to the midnight cry. There was something in that message that was to prepare our hearts for Christ's return. So here we find an example of something that someone has brought up a criticism without carefully thinking it through. It's obvious that she couldn't have gotten it from a publication that was not yet published. Well, that's just one of the things that I have discovered as I've been going through these notes. A lot of the stories that we have heard in the past don't have a lot of verification to them. They have been repeated and they have been inspiring, but what I have done in this book is to call attention to the historical details that shows us that we have not believed cunningly devised fables. Rather, these are stories that are founded in the actual events that took place. As she shared with the group the vision, they encouraged her to share with others. And word came that she should go share it in Poland, Maine. So this takes us to the next little discovery. And this has been uh, a cooperative effort that I have discovered working with Bruce Weaver, who did some of the early work on a trial that was called the Trial of Israel Damon. But prior to it, there are some other travels that she had. So let's take a look here in the travels in Maine. She said, I had 3 visions and was then bidden to relate these to others. Providentially, the way opened for me to go with my brother in law to my sisters in Poland, 30 miles from my home. I there had opportunity to bear my testimony. So she went there. She was not very able. This is an example of one of the sleighs that they would have ridden in. It was cold. This is New England, and it was a very cold winter. We're talking about below freezing at times. So she arrived in Poland, and she went to a meeting that was held at McGuire's Hill. John McGuire was the one there. I recently ran across a book that describes going to John McGuire's and some of the Adventists in that area. And what's interesting is here's a map that I was able to find of West Poland, Maine, and here's John McGuire's property right here on the side of Tripp Lake. And over here is McCann and Foss. Those are the last names of Ellen White's brother-in-laws. So they lived right over here, and here's McGuire's. And then if we just go up just a little bit, we see here's the Baptist church. Libby was the pastor. It was a Free Will Baptist church, and most of these folks were members of it. In 1844, they renounced their membership, a number of them listed. And that's how we were able to track down one of the individuals after they had the meetings here in McGuire's Hill. She was invited to go from Poland. All right, so we're going to go through here, journey to the Central West. Providentially, the way opened for me to go to the central part of Maine, and I would journey for 3 months. Brother William Jordan was obliged to go to Orrington on business, and his sister, which is Sarah Jordan, she says in another document, accompanied him, and I was urged to go with him and relate my visions. So this was the beginning of her travels. And I found some details about them. So I was able to identify William and Sarah Jordan lived in West Poland. At first, I thought they were in Portland, but they lived right there. They were some of the ones who had signed the documents asking to be dropped from the Free Will Baptist Church. And I want to give credit to Bruce Weaver for his help in locating the father of William Jordan. And then we discover it's the son and the daughter who are the ones that are involved here. William Jordan was a tailor, so perhaps he was going there to purchase some materials, but also it said he was returning a horse and buggy to James White. And I found where James White had gone to their home back in the 40s during the movement getting ready for Christ's return in the 40s. And again, there's this book, sketch of the life and religious experience of Luther Botel, which mentions stopping off at the Jordan's house. So we're putting the pieces together and seeing how that here was Brother Jordan come for the purpose of taking him his horse and sleigh. And this is where she met him formally. This is the first that he remembered it. So here's a little view of the map from Portland, 30 miles up to Poland, Maine. It's a little bit inland, further inland, but not too far inland. And then cutting across the state on up here to Orrington. So they travel this whole way by sleigh. That's a lot of sleighing in the cold weather. And that Orrington was where James White was. And then they did some other visits up here in Garland, Exeter, and Atkinson. And we can talk about some of those later. Well, that's just a little taste of some of the details that are adding the reality to the story that I've been putting in. Still hoping to make some identifications of some people that have not been identified over the years um, in another story that takes place later. But I'm filling those in, and to me, this is really exciting. I guess I'm geeking out on the details, but it's really exciting to see how that these are real stories of God's guidance, and how that when she has a vision, it's very specific, it's very helpful to the people of the time, it draws them closer to Christ and to his word. One of the little advertisements I'd like to put in here at the end. This week I was encouraged to join a discussion, and I'm going to put at the end of this video an invitation for you, and down in the description box for you to be able to go and see a little informal discussion we had about what it is that impresses me, why there is a God. And it was an interesting discussion. So I encourage you to go there and check the link out. All right. Well, God bless you. Until next time, take care.